The alley smelled of wet concrete and garbage, the kind of place where shadows seemed to linger longer than they should. A little girl, no older than 7, ran barefoot over the uneven pavement, her tiny feet scraping against the cracks. Tears streaked her face, mixing with the dirt that had clung to her cheeks. Her voice, high-pitched and desperate, echoed off the brick walls. "Please, somebody help. They're beating my mama." Ahead, a group of bikers lounged on their motorcycles, engines purring lazily in the afternoon heat. Their leather jackets gleamed under the sunlight, tattoos stretched across arms like stories written in ink. Normally, the rumble of motorcycles and the rumpled chaos of their lives kept them indifferent to the world around them, but the sound of the girl's cries pierced the usual haze. She skidded to a stop in front of them, trembling. Her small hands waved frantically, pointing back toward the shadows of the alley where muffled thuds and harsh shouts broke through the afternoon calm. Her voice cracked with fear. They're hurting her." The bikers exchanged glances. Some raised eyebrows, others leaned forward, hands gripping handlebars. The leader, a tall man with a weathered face and gray-streaked hair, narrowed his eyes. There was something in the girl's voice, something raw and urgent, that ignited a spark in the group's collective conscience. Around them, the alley seemed to shrink, the air thick with tension. A stray cat darted across the ground, sending up a flurry of trash, but the bikers didn't flinch. Time slowed as the girl's sobs filled the space, desperate and fragile. Then, almost instinctively, the leader's hand moved toward his bike, revving the engine slightly, a low, threatening growl that promised action. The girl's hope, fragile as it was, glimmered in her wide, tear-filled eyes. The bikers, once just figures of intimidation and leather, now became her only chance at rescue. She took a shaky step forward, trusting strangers with nothing but courage and the roar of their machines to stop the violence that had chased her out of the shadows. Without a word, the leader swung his leg over the motorcycle and kicked it into gear. The engine roared to life, a deep, vibrating growl that seemed to shake the walls of the alley. One by one, the other bikers followed suit, their machines lining up behind the girl like a moving wall of leather and steel. She ran ahead, her small feet barely keeping pace, guiding them toward the darkened doorway of an old apartment building at the alley's end. The muffled thuds and angry shouts grew louder as they approached. The little girl's voice trembled as she whispered, "Over there, please, hurry." The bikers didn't hesitate. Their usual swagger was replaced by a quiet intensity, each man and woman moving with purpose. The tension hung in the air like smoke, thick and choking, as if the alley itself sensed that something monumental was about to unfold. As they rounded the corner, the scene came into view. A man, tall and menacing, raised his fists against a woman who cowered on the floor. Her eyes were wide with fear, hands lifted in a futile attempt to protect herself. The little girl screamed again, her voice cutting through the heavy silence, "Stop. Please stop." The bikers didn't charge recklessly. Instead, they formed a semicircle around the aggressor, engines still rumbling, the vibration under their feet sending a silent message, "Back off." The man froze, uncertainty replacing his rage as the intimidating presence of the bikers pressed in. One biker stepped closer, hand resting on his handlebar, ready to act in an instant. Another extended an arm toward the woman, guiding her gently but firmly out of harm's way. The woman's sobs mingled with the girl's whimpers, a haunting chorus of fear and relief. Every biker in the circle was calm, controlled, their collective aura making it clear that no physical fight was necessary. The man's chest heaved as he realized he was completely outmatched, not by fists, but by the sheer authority and resolve of people who were unafraid to act when it mattered most. The leader of the bikers finally stepped forward, his boots scraping against the cracked pavement. His deep voice cut through the tension like steel. "Step back, now." The man hesitated, then slowly, almost grudgingly, obeyed. The bikers didn't move an inch, yet the power in their stillness was enough to dismantle the threat without a single blow being thrown. The alley seemed to hold its breath, suspended between fear and relief. The threatening man's fists had lowered, but his chest heaved with anger and confusion. He was surrounded, yet not by weapons, just the imposing presence of the bikers and the quiet, unwavering authority in their eyes. The leader stepped forward, boots crunching on the gravel-strewn ground, his leather jacket creaking softly with each movement. "Step away, now," he said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. The words were simple, almost conversational, yet they resonated with authority. The man's legs wobbled as if he'd forgotten how to stand, realizing that brute force alone could not overcome those who refused to be intimidated. Meanwhile, another biker knelt down, extending a protective arm toward the woman on the ground. "Come on, ma'am, we're taking you out of here," he said gently. The woman hesitated, her body trembling, but the sincerity in his voice gave her a fragile sense of safety. Slowly, she allowed him to guide her up, her body leaning against him as if clinging to a lifeline. The little girl ran to her mother, wrapping her tiny arms tightly around her waist. The sobs had softened into shaky breaths, and for the first time in what felt like hours, there was a glimmer of relief in her eyes. The bikers formed a protective barrier around them, silent sentinels watching every movement of the aggressor. The man, sensing that the odds had shifted entirely, took a cautious step back, then another, until he finally retreated down the alley, his anger simmering but powerless against the unity and calm determination of the bikers. Not a single punch had been thrown, yet the danger had dissipated completely. The mother clutched her daughter, eyes filled with tears, gratitude radiating through her exhausted frame. Thank you so much," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rumble of engines. The leader nodded, a small, reassuring smile crossing his weathered face. For a moment, the chaos of the alley faded, replaced by the quiet aftermath of courage and protection. The bikers' presence alone had turned a moment of terror into safety. The mother and daughter were shaken, but alive, and in that alley, on that ordinary afternoon, the unlikely heroes had made all the difference. The alley slowly returned to its usual quiet, the echoes of shouted warnings and revving engines fading into the distance. The mother clutched her daughter tightly, feeling the rapid thrum of the little girl's heartbeat against her chest. Dust and grime covered their clothes, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that they were safe. The bikers had vanished the threat without a single act of unnecessary violence, their presence alone enough to restore order. The girl, still trembling, looked up at the leather-clad strangers with wide, tear-filled eyes. You saved us," she whispered, her small hand reaching out to touch the leader's jacket. He crouched slightly to meet her gaze, his rough face softening into a reassuring smile. "We're just glad you're both okay," he said, his voice deep but gentle. The mother's hands shook as she thanked them, words spilling out in a mixture of relief and disbelief. "I don't know how to ever thank you," she stammered. One of the bikers nudged her gently toward the safer, well-lit street beyond the alley, making sure they had a clear path home. The girl clung to her mother, whispering prayers of gratitude, her earlier panic replaced by a fragile sense of hope. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles, the engines hummed to life again, this time less like a warning and more like a promise that they would always stand up for those in danger. The sunlight glinted off their chrome and leather, casting long shadows that stretched across the cracked pavement like silent guardians fading into the distance. The mother and daughter watched them go, their hearts still racing, the adrenaline slowly giving way to awe. "Remember this," the leader called over his shoulder, his voice carrying across the alley, "never be afraid to seek help." The words lingered in the air long after the rumble of engines disappeared. The mother hugged her daughter tightly, tears streaming freely now. She whispered, "You see, there are good people in the world. People who will stand up for us." The little girl nodded, her eyes shining with newfound courage, the terror of the afternoon gradually giving way to relief and gratitude. For both of them, that alley would forever hold the memory of unexpected heroes, strangers who didn't need fists or weapons to make a difference, only courage, presence, and a willingness to act when it mattered most. And in that lesson, they found something far stronger than fear: hope.